He left home at 16, moved to France alone, and built a business before he could even vote. I just sat down with Jack Wagoner, and he runs the Grateful podcast with over 121 episodes. He's interviewed best-selling authors, keynote speakers, creators with hundreds of thousands of followers. He started at 17 from a bedroom in France after building a YouTube automation company and managing 4 employees as a teenager. When I asked him what slows him down the most, he didn't say finding guests, didn't say recording. He said repurposing. He listens back to every episode on walks and bike rides, scrubbing through footage to find the one clip that's going to land. He's bouncing between Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT just to pull the best moments. 3 AI tools, still a bottleneck. And that's the exact problem we're building Content Stash to solve. You already have a vault of content sitting in your drive. It hasn't been labeled or sorted. Content Stash audits what you have, identifies the gaps, and repurposes what's already there into pieces that actually perform. So take me back to the beginning. You were on an exchange program in France and decided to start a podcast. What was going through your head in that moment?
So it's a long story. And I was 15 years old and I was doing everything right, you know? I did literally everything I could possibly do right in terms of going to school and taking all the hardest classes and doing great in those classes, being a 3-sport athlete, crushing it in sports, having a ton of friends, and it wasn't enough. I just kept wanting to achieve and achieve and achieve, and that's what I thought would bring me the feeling I was chasing. So my next step was what's something crazy and huge and big I can do? So I decided to go to France for a year. And my junior year of high school, I studied abroad in France. I didn't know the language. I left my parents, my friends, the comfort of my reputation, all of that at home. And I went to France for a year. And that was a gross oversimplification of the decision process, right? But once I get there, I'm in this new environment and it's completely foreign and I can't talk to anybody and it's all new, but I love it and I'm loving it and I'm on this complete high. And eventually the novelty kind of faded down. And there were 3 things that I really, really wanted. One of which was to learn to speak French. Another was to gain friendships there because it was lonely at the beginning, especially not speaking the language. And I really crave connection. And thirdly, I wanted to make money online. And so I started a YouTube automation business. All the money that I had gathered from previous jobs as a rock climbing instructor, I invested it into a YouTube automation course. I was sold very well, and in a few months, I was successful. I had 4 employees at the age of, well, now I'm 17 years old, right? So we went from 15. We made the decision at 16, left to go to France at 16, turned 17 in December, had and started my business, and I had 4 employees. I was making money that most 17-year-olds don't think of making. It wasn't some crazy number, but it wasn't nothing. And I realized that after I accomplished all 3 of those goals that I set at the beginning, I was speaking French, I was had an online business and was making money, and I had a bunch of friends. I still was not fulfilled in here. So I eventually pivoted and I'm like, I want to learn from people that I'm listening to in the personal development space that seem happy. They seem like they have this feeling that all the things and all the accomplishments I'm obtaining are not fulfilling and are not getting me. How can I do that? And I remember the exact moment I was biking back from the climbing gym in the rain. I had these cargo pants on and they got soaked in the front, but they were dry in the back, you know, because it's raining and it's coming down so far this way. And I had my quiet left AirPod in, listening to a podcast with Ed Milet and Jay Shetty. And I said, I want to talk to these guys. And I haven't yet talked to Ed. I've had a very, very brief online conversation with Jay. And that has been my goal. That's what went through my mind when I started the podcast to realize I want to be happy. I'm not going to settle for anything less than joy and fulfillment, and I'm going to figure out how to do it. And podcasting is the way there.
Man, that's incredible to hear. At 17, you're absolutely killing it. Kudos to you. And when it came to the automation business, like I'm a little bit curious because I come from the space of specifically LinkedIn automation. LinkedIn automation helped
Yeah.
me break through in my first tech sales role, and I started tech sales. I think it was in 22. That was my
Okay.
first tech sales job was with a company called Optimi, which was for grants management platforms working for enterprise companies. And then I had a side gig working for a company called Dripify that I'm still sort of connected with in a minor
Okay.
way. I still keep communication with them, and they have a LinkedIn automation platform. So I come from the space of LinkedIn automation of just generating those one-on-one DMs to do the sales funnel as
Hmm.
opposed to doing the marketing stuff that most people think about when they think of social media. In your case, what did that initial YouTube automation offer look like?
So yeah, YouTube automation is very different from like LinkedIn automation or other social media platforms where the goal is to generate an amount of views so that you can uh, gain ad revenue, right? AdSense revenue. And so the automation in itself is it's not really automated. It's outsourcing the work and hiring people off of platforms such as Fiverr or what's Upwork? Yeah, Upwork. And getting them to do some of the work so that all you are focusing on as the manager, the CEO, the founder, whatever you want to call it of the company of the channel is literally studying content, studying competitors, looking at outliers, what videos did well, what channels have low subscribers but high views right now, and you spend time studying that, and then you get to train your team. You have what I had was a video editor, a script writer who I eventually fired to use AI because AI did it better. And I had a thumbnail designer and a voiceover artist. And that's what I did. It was faceless YouTube videos. And I made all my money through YouTube AdSense. Like if you get, for example, a video to hit 400,000 views and I targeted, I'm not going to say the name of the channel or exactly what it was, but my content was aimed at higher earning demographics. So you're looking at like 40-year-olds plus in the United States. It was mostly, honestly, 55 plus. So you're talking like retired people with disposable income in the United States. And advertisers will pay YouTube more to target those demographics because they have a like they'll pay more, right? And this is probably all stuff that you know. And so all my revenue was being generated from YouTube AdSense. I look back now and I have no regrets for my life, but if I could do one thing differently, I would have gotten brand deals and done so much more in on that side of things because I could have double, tripled my income at that age. But now, yeah, we're 2 years later and I'm in a completely different area of things.
And so with this faceless YouTube channel, do you still run it, or is that something that you put on pause to work on the podcast and your other offers?
I put it on pause because what I realized, and I kind of alluded to in my previous story, is I was completely unfulfilled. At 17 years old, had uh, perfect grades, was an amazing athlete. I mean, I was never the best athlete in the world, but I loved sports and I was a good athlete. And I had amazing friends. I'd learned a foreign language. I was making money online, and I still felt like empty. I was like,
Mhm.
what? So I put it on pause after a few things and after kind of losing momentum on the channel, had a few bad videos in a row. Um, and I decided to go all in on on my podcast. And I actually had started the podcast right
Mhm.
before the YouTube automation. It was just me rambling. It wasn't really me excited to do it. It was not the same motivation I have now, but it was December of 2024 when I started to go more all in on the podcast. And it's been over a year since then, a year and a few months. And yeah, so the YouTube automation is no longer something that I'm putting energy into. Sometimes I'll get a nice check from YouTube AdSense if an old video did well, but yeah. That's where things are at this moment.
And so the idea for the Grateful podcast came initially when you were listening to another podcast. You shared that story with you on the bike. How did that vision change and evolve as you released more and more episodes and you have worked on it for the past 12, 13 months? How did that podcast evolve in its vision?
That's a great question. As I said, when I started, it was a vision of I want to talk to these people. I want to be in the room with these people. They're the people that get me. They understand me, right? And as I started to take action, because there was a big gap between then and when I actually started like interviewing people, because there was some solo episodes. And in that gap, I started to develop my thesis, which is called the duality of gratitude and ambition. And the duality of gratitude and ambition is this. We as humans, as ambitious people, so you would relate to this, we're never going to stop setting goals, right? Always going to fail if our solution to try to find happiness is to cap the ceiling, because the ceiling needs to grow. Hedonic adaptation is there so that we can keep progressing, because as organisms, we need to keep progressing in life, right? So the goal is never going to go away. Once we achieve something, we are always going to try to find another goal. So the only thing that we can control is this baseline, is what I call the floor, and that's with gratitude. The only way that we're ever going to feel content is through being grateful for what we have right now while chasing something, because that pursuit that gives us meaning and the gratitude that makes right now great, because we're only ever going to be in the right now. So I had this thesis, and this thesis has also evolved over the years, or over the since whenever I came up with it. And I started off the podcast really focused on that. And as I have branched out and tried to talk to so many people, I would get one guest. And my first big guest, his name was Nick Pollard. People displeaser, 470,000 followers on Instagram, something like that. And he then gave me credibility to get some more big guests. And I just wanted to talk to these people and ask them about this hypothesis I'd had. And as I started talking to these people, I realized, wow, I'm really just doing this because I want to learn and I want to figure out more about life. At this point, I was 18 and I'm an 18-year-old kid, or I was an 18-year-old kid, and I was trying to learn about life through these amazing people I'd never have the opportunity to talk to if it weren't for this podcast. So I use it as a conduit to learn for myself and to test my hypothesis on life. And I started to realize, oh, there's people that are listening to this and love it. And so I started to try to package it. I went into 3 episodes a week because I knew that I needed to get really good at interviewing people. And that became my priority for a bit. How can I maximize my skill of interviewing, of asking deep questions and getting the answers that are going to best help me and my audience? And then I started to prioritize growth. And as I prioritized growth of the podcast, I cut down on some of those episodes and I started targeting higher caliber guests. And then I realized that, maybe the podcast, and this is the point I'm at now, it's still super important, but what it's really allowing me to do is get my message out there in a mass way and connect with these amazing people. But the things that need to grow are under the surface, and they include speaking, consulting, coaching work. And so that's kind of been the evolution of the podcast. Yeah.
And it resonates with me a lot because the starting of another channel, which is called Breaking Cigars, which is a channel that has cigars as the focal point, but that's really not the point of the channel. The point of the channel is to interview people that I want to interview over cigars. And
Hmm.
so I created this, I guess you can call it brand over a period of 4 months of now posting on it. And it's a bunch of educational historical shorts on Instagram and YouTube about just cigar history and cigar education, things that people get wrong about cigars. And I think that that audience was very underserved when it came to the style of content because repeatedly I've been told that people haven't seen the kind of content that I put out. And funny enough, I don't consume really any cigar content myself, but I
Hmm.
enjoy cigars, and some of the most meaningful conversations that I've had have been over cigars that have changed the trajectory of my life completely. And so I said, I want to be a little bit more creative. I want to talk to people. I want to put content out there. And that was essentially the start of me producing content was through breaking cigars. And it just started with my phone, me shooting myself and then adding some background images to these 90-second shorts. And it was all just an excuse to build an audience to watch me talk to cool people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so far it's only I think around seven or eight episodes when it comes to the podcast with an audience of roughly 2,000 on YouTube and 40,000 on Instagram. And the interesting observation is that the podcasts tend to get way fewer views because people aren't there for necessarily the podcast and me interviewing people about all sorts of different things just over cigars. The people are there for cigar history and education. But
Yeah.
the funny thing is, when it comes to the fulfillment side of it, the part that is most fulfilling to me and most interesting to me is having those guests on and being able to pick their brain and just hang out with them.
Yeah. It's this dilemma that we get into as podcasters and creators in general, right? Where the thing that grows the brand and the viewership and the audience isn't always the thing that fulfills us most. And we have to order our priorities to figure out what we're going to do. And especially in podcasts right now, I've been able to talk to some people that are really, really high up in the podcast scene. And I've learned that a lot of big podcasts, not the top ones, but the ones in the tier right below that, are actually losing viewers and audience members right now because there's so many right now. There's so many podcasts, and people are increasingly saying like, "Oh yeah, I watch your podcasts on Instagram." You're like, "Oh, great. That's not actually the podcast. Those are clips from the podcast."
Yeah.
So we have to really balance this thing as creatives, as podcasters of where are we putting our energy? Do we want this to be a way of us just having deep conversations with people and getting to know them better, or are we trying to grow the audience and are we going in that direction? Because those are two very different fires we have to feed.
What are you aiming for in terms of the podcast and the funnel? That's something we're thinking about is like what's the purpose? Is it lead generation? Is it money through the door? Is it growing the audience and establishing trust? Is it setting yourself up for one big interview with a very particular person that you have in mind? It's worth starting with the end in mind when
Yes.
creating the brand. And the end in mind in my head is there's a few particular people that I want to interview myself. And the podcast is just an excuse to talk to them.
Yeah. Who are those people?
I would say a few are uh, like one of the followers, surprisingly enough, that I would love to grab cigars with on Instagram is Dana White. Like I would love to
Okay.
sit down with him after his big event at the White House, the UFC event.
Yeah.
Just again, this is like a dream of mine. I would love to grab some cigars with people in the fight space. I enjoy MMA and fighting a lot,
Yeah.
and even here in Riga, I find myself hanging out with people from my gym quite a bit. There's something to be said for people that really enjoy the daily struggle of fighting because when you go, especially when you participate on like an amateur or pro fighting level, it's you find a specific kind of person attending those kinds of events and those kinds of classes, and I vibe with that group of people quite a bit. So if I could name a name of a person that I would love to interview, would be probably Dana White, and just grabbing cigars with him would be super cool. What about you? In your case, you mentioned a few initially that have inspired you to build your podcast. Is there anyone else that comes to mind?
I think recently, if I could interview anyone, it would be J. Cole. Do you know the rapper J. Cole?
I know Jake Klaus, but not Jake Cole.
Okay, very, very different people.
Yes.
Yeah, I considered right there. I was gonna say someone, and then that wasn't actually the real answer. J. Cole is my favorite rapper, my favorite musician ever. He wrote a song called "Love Yours." Ain't no such thing as a life that's better than yours, he says. And I yeah, I love him. He's been the way that I've developed. He's been very important in developing my beliefs, just having him in my head all the time. He recently released his final album, The Fall Off, and it's so cool to me because this period of my life is so much growth, and I'm always going to be able to look back in my life with this music being nostalgic for the period that everything was shooting up. And I find that really cool. But yeah, he would be the person I'd most want to have on my podcast because he does not do interviews that often. And especially with people in the self-development space. But he has been so profound in my personal development.
And how do you typically decide who to bring on your podcast? You've had quite a few episodes. You've had 121 episodes plus so far. How do you select the guests? Do you have a system that you go with, or is it that you find someone cool either on LinkedIn or within the social stratosphere and say, "Hey, like, do you want to do something? Do you want to shoot a podcast together?"
Yeah, this has also changed as I've grown in my show. At the beginning, I literally just reached out to anyone I thought was really cool. So my first guest was my mom. My mom has done, she had a podcast back in the day, and she is a health coach, life coach, personal trainer. And yeah, I just talked to my mom on camera. It was amazing. And my second guest was my friend Harrison, who is an incredible singer-songwriter. One day he's gonna be up there with like the biggest stars in the world. Best voice I've ever heard in my life. And he's crushing it right now. Like 80,000 Spotify monthly listeners, and it just keeps going up. So here's my second episode. We did that in his recording studio, and I had my dad, who's an artist, a climber influencer that I'm friends with. It was all over the place. And now it's gotten to the point where I was scavenging to get any guests on the show. Anyone that said yes was like, let's go, we got him. Now I have to say no so much, you know?
Mhm.
And I'm filled, my inbox is filled with, hey, can I come on your podcast? My LinkedIn messages, hey, can I come on your podcast? And the way that I decide is honestly not as organized as I'd like to tell you. Um, it's a lot of my personal alignment with the guest. So, yeah, you could have someone that is it's given a TED Talk, has written a best-selling book, and has tens of thousands of followers, and I really don't align with their message. It's not the
Mhm.
type of thing I want my audience to believe, and I won't bring them on. But you can have someone that is just starting out and they have an incredible message, and I believe that they really can make an audience feel, and I'll bring them on the show. But Oftentimes I do prefer people that have written books or have a podcast themselves or
Mhm.
are keynote speakers because I want them to be able to articulate very well.
Absolutely. Was there anything that stood out in my message to you that did make you come on this podcast? Or was it just the vibe of the profile on LinkedIn? Because I treat like I've done a lot of different LinkedIn setups, and we try to treat our LinkedIn pages like a landing page in some sense.
Yeah.
Did it give you like a vibe of, oh, okay, like this guy seems to be in line with what I'm currently producing with content, and so let's shoot something together? Or what kind of made you pull the trigger on this specific podcast?
For you, and I actually have your LinkedIn up right now, you have your face in a lot of videos, and you can go down and you can watch and you can get your vibe, and it's just a good vibe. It's something where it's like I would have a great conversation with this guy. When it comes to me going on other shows, I don't get as many people that reach out. So automatically that was a switch for me. It was like, oh, there's a message that says, "Can I would love to have you as a guest on my show." Interesting. Let me look into this guy. And yeah, your LinkedIn page, I just watched some of your featured video, and I'm like, yeah, this guy seems like someone I could have a good conversation with. And a lot of times the people I get are like people I don't think I would have I can have a good conversation with almost anyone. It's one of my skills, but not someone that I would have a productive conversation with where we get to the level where we're both contributing at the level I want to.
Absolutely. And when it comes to your podcast, how do you typically go about the research process? Do you
Mm.
do any kind of looking into your guest? Do you run any kind of prompts on, let's say, Claude or GPT? Do you run any kind of background checks? What does that process look like? Or is it entirely just vibe? Let's get the person on the podcast and whatever we talk about, we talk about.
Absolutely not to the just vibe part. The like vibe is a huge factor in me choosing. And it is important in the conversation, but any good host is extremely well researched. My favorite thing to do, and I have a long process. I spend a lot of time on research, and it's one of the things that's helped me continue to get bigger and bigger guests and enter into these circles of like bigger creators because I impress the guest with my research. And that's honestly the biggest advice I'd have to any podcaster is you're impressing me with your research. And I love when I can impress a guest with my research. Because then they'll recommend me one of their friends that I would love to talk to, right? Um, but the biggest thing that I do is listen to a guest on another show in 1x speed. So you get to understand their cadence, how they speak, and you can almost ask the question for the guest or for the host, sorry. Um, so a good example is I had Dan Millman on my show, who's the author of The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, one of the biggest best-selling books in personal development history, and he was on every show you could think of. But the episode I listened to that I really enjoyed was him on Lewis Howes, the Greatness Podcast, which is a huge show. And Lewis asked a question. Dan answered. I forget the specific question, or else I'd go into detail. And after Dan answered, I was still curious. He didn't quite go as deeply as I wanted him to. But Lewis just moved on. He asked an unrelated question and said, all good. And for me, I made a note of that. Like, all right, there's a story that I can get Dan to go deeper into that I want to hear about, the audience wants to hear about, that he didn't go deeper into here. And that's one of the notes I make that helps me guide the conversation as a host.
And did you find yourself changing your interview style from episode one to episode 121? How did your style evolve?
It involved in two ways. There was a first, the evolution of I need to research a lot more. And then there became the point where I was like, all right, I'm here and this is too structured and I'm literally reading a question off. You need to dive in with emotional intelligence. And that's a scary part. And lead from the information you have up here and what feels right, where you think you could dive deeper emotionally with the guest. And those were the two, yeah, I'd say that's the biggest like overarching evolution of how I conduct interviews. In between that, there's a lot of growth that's happened. I've grown tremendously as an interviewer from the first time I interviewed someone to just the other day. And that's the biggest thing that, as I said earlier in the podcast, it's the biggest thing I optimized for a long time. I did 3 episodes a week, which only people like Chris Williamson do. And I did it as an 18-year-old kid in high school and a bunch of AP classes, whatever, playing baseball. I did that because my biggest goal was just to get better as an interviewer because I knew that once I was a great interviewer, there was only that's the leading effect and the progress and the views and the guests that was all lagging behind my interviewing quality and skills.
And you dropped a lot of gold there. And I think that's something that a lot of people really underestimate. I think that's really the power of the West. The sales, the marketing, the communication is something that is very heavily emphasized in Western education as opposed to the Eastern Bloc, let's say Russia and China. And I can speak from this because I come from Eastern education. I was raised in Moldova, went to a Russian school, very familiar with the Russian education system, and it's very technical. There's a big emphasis on STEM, on the sciences, on the maths, but something that the West completely knocks out of the ballpark is the communication, the presentations, and the group work.
Hmm.
And that's something that I didn't allow myself to dwell too much into growing up. And I think that's one of my biggest regrets. I don't really live with any regrets, but it's like if I
Yeah.
was to go back and change something, let's say around university time, as opposed to sitting in front of my textbook studying all day to become a civil engineer, which now I completely uninvolved with, instead of sharpening that axe and studying all the technical stuff, I should have spent more time kind of in the startup space, rubbing shoulders with professors, meeting more people, going to different events and competitions and hackathons, and really making connections, which is why what you're doing, I think, is so powerful. Just continuing to sharpen that axe in the space of just being a good interviewer.
Hmm. Yeah, because being a good interviewer, then if you want to go into sales, for example, or you want to start something unrelated to a podcast, if you can sell, or if you can ask good questions as an interviewer, then you can sell because all you have to do is get to understand what your prospect needs, right? And then boom, if you're good at asking questions, sales is boom, you got it. If you're great at asking questions, you can understand marketing. I think sales is a little more direct, but asking good questions and being able to connect with people and then having that network to support you as well is all that came from being a good interviewer, and all that's boosting me in a way that honestly I couldn't have predicted a year ago.
What would you say is the biggest mistake that you made early on with your podcast journey?
Biggest mistake? That's a great question and one I don't know if I think about enough. Um,
Or maybe the biggest
biggest,
thing that you would change early on?
right. Yeah. There are a few things. First of all, I definitely if I wanted to grow, which was my goal for a long time, I definitely could have positioned myself with a better niche, right? I could have niched down better and really focused on a single subject. That would have been a great thing for me to do. Um, Another thing would have been spend more time on the short form and making it look high quality and invest in a good camera and do more in person. Um, those are the big things. I've learned a lot, and at the moment, my biggest goal is not growing the show. Um, it will be again over the summer, but at the moment, it's a lot of growing behind the scenes, as I mentioned earlier in the show. But if I'm going, when I grow the show next, and that when that's the big goal, I'll definitely take a lot of different steps than I did at the beginning. And a lot of that relates to just the packaging of the content and the the purpose, how purposeful you are with how you package it and how it looks and how high quality it looks. Another one, and this is very, thank you for like reminding me of this, is I spent a lot of time like trying to leverage my youth, whereas recently I do not try to leverage my youth. I don't lie about my age ever, but I try to act, or I don't even try to act. I just embrace the fact that I'm not a normal 19-year-old and I embrace my maturity. And by doing that, people don't even recognize and they try not to think about my age because I used to lead hi, I'm an 18-year-old high school student with a dream. Do you want to be on my show? And now I get to say, I'm a 19-year-old coach, speaker, and podcaster with over 120 episodes with blah, 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 with these people. This is what I'm doing. Please come on my show. And the authority there winds very differently. So I think also trying to leverage my age when it was probably my biggest weakness was my biggest mistake.
Very interesting because I would say it does position you in a very unique way, but you're now transitioning away from that into something even more powerful that you've grown into, which 100% makes sense. And I would say like when starting off, you kind of end up rolling with your guns. You end up sticking to your guns and leaning into your natural advantages. And I think yourself having started off, I think you mentioned you were 17 doing the podcast initially. I think it's a great advantage. And it reminds me actually of a guy here in Latvia. Um, I believe he's around your age, maybe just a bit younger. And the guy's doing crazy hustle. He has this woodworking shop that's this old Soviet abandoned, not warehouse, but like a shed. And it's full of these half disassembled Soviet machinery that's like super dangerous to run in a town half an hour away from like this tiny city. And I visited him and I saw his operation and just the amount of hustle and effort and energy that he brings to the table. And seeing a guy like that at that age, really putting the work in, really taking the risk, really believing in his dream, I would tell to him like, hey, like triple down on that because when people see a young guy that age just absolutely killing it, when it comes to making a decision of who I want to give my business, who do I want to give my money, who do I want to give my time, who do I want to give my energy, I'm going to put my money in this guy because he's really not just young and youthful and full of energy, but he puts his all of himself to that task and he really wears his heart on his sleeve. And I respect that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that a young person that is completely committed to their goal and crushing it is honestly the safest bet you can make because they're that the drive's not going away. We talked about it earlier. We're never going to stop setting goals. So if you're already up here, these goals are just going to continue and continue. Um, you have to position it correctly, though. I think that when I was trying to do that, I was acting as if the person was helping me out. Like I had a dream and I had nothing to give them from that. And I wasn't positioning it correctly. I could have said, "Hey, I founded a YouTube automation company. I've managed 4 employees. I've done XYZ," and come off as a more authoritative, trusted figure. You have to, at my age, I think it's very important, and at any age, just to figure out how you are talking about yourself to leverage the things you've done for the most credibility and most buy-in from others.
100%. And you touched a little bit on the post production because it does most people may not realize it until they dip their toes into the space of content and recording and automation and editing. They don't realize how much work it is to then process all these videos and turn them into shorts and to schedule them out and to communicate with the team. Walk me through that production workflow. What happens between hitting stop and the episode going live for you and your team?
Yeah. So I've had moments where I've had an editor. But at the moment I do everything myself right now, given the phase that we're in with the podcast. And I once I stop the episode, right, instantly I'm gonna start thinking about what my favorite parts of it were and were the clippable moments. Sometimes even during the episode, I have a little button on Riverside and I can clip it within the episode. And the first step to creating great content afterward is really listening and understanding what the best moments were. So I'll maybe on a walk or on a bike ride or run or whatever, I'll have the episode playing in my ear. I'll listen on 2x speed and I'll think, what are the best moments from this that I can repurpose as a clip? And then we take that and we put it into whatever editing software we use. And the first step is to really get clear on the story and what we're trying to get out of that clip and then cut it down so that we have all the fluff out and get a real emotional buy-in in the first like 3 to 5 seconds, and then try to make it a little bit longer. Something one of my friends who has a very successful podcast at the moment, figured out through studying his content is that any short form that was over 40 seconds may not have gone viral as likely, but led to conversions to the podcast and actual listeners a lot better and followers as well. So try to keep it over 40 seconds. And then from there, add music to it and export it and simple captions. I found through experimenting with different styles, simple edits, simple captions, simple post-production makes it look clean and gets better buy and better listens. And that's really the process that we go through to create, or currently I go through to create the final kind of product you'd see on Instagram or on LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, I'll write a summary, I'll have an intro, and I'll post that sometimes. But that's mainly the process.
And what kind of tools do you use and which ones are your favorite?
I've
You
played around
mentioned
with all.
Riverside.
Yeah, Riverside's great. Riverside's AI is, I bet, going to get great at this point. I don't love it. Um, so I've played around with all the AI. I mean, I've spent the most time on chat, but Claude recently, I've really enjoyed. Gemini is incredible. So I'll take the transcript and I'll put that in the AI and I'll have that pull out some of the best moments if I don't have time to immediately go through the episode. And I can look at what Claude or Gemini or Chat GPT says for like what are the best moments, and I'll have that really help me package the episode as well in terms of creating a title and testing thumbnails and creating a description and SEO tags and all of that. Um, AI is extremely helpful in doing that.
Yeah, and we used to use Opus for the clipping, but we
Yeah.
find more success nowadays with just taking the transcript and throwing it into Claude and asking the
Yes.
best way to like the best clips from the conversation. And where do you usually post? Is it just YouTube? Is it Instagram? Have you considered other platforms as well to see if it resonates? And how did you select the social media platforms on which you post?
First off, I'd just like to touch on something you said that you used to use Opus. I used it too and found that immediately it kind of lowers the brand image because it's the easiest thing you can do, right?
Mhm,
And the captions honestly don't look good and they're easily recognizable. So I think the
mhm,
switch is important. As far as the social media platforms that I do post on, YouTube gets everything. Sometimes YouTube doesn't like the music that I use on my shorts. So they'll take it down. But as far as long form, everything goes on YouTube. Short form, Instagram is my primary platform. It's where I've reached. Uh, I'm able to collaborate with guests, so that makes Instagram really, really nice. LinkedIn, my guests can repost stuff. So again, I really like LinkedIn. I've messed
mhm.
around on TikTok. I've never been I I've honestly just personally always tried to stay away from TikTok because I don't want to ever get sucked into scrolling. Never ever have I once scrolled on TikTok and I hope to keep it that way. So sometimes I'll go on and I'll post my stuff, but I haven't had the most success there. But it's all because I just haven't tried and haven't been invested in the TikTok, if that makes sense. Um, is there any TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube? Those are my four. And I picked them again. I said Instagram mostly because of the collaboration feature is what makes it one of my primary sources to go to. Same with LinkedIn. And then YouTube now is a collab feature as well.
Yeah, and Instagram and YouTube have been the two big ones for me, even though I've been on LinkedIn forever. And it was very interesting. Uh, I've interviewed a lady named Viveka. I forget her last name. I would have to double check. Sorry, Viveka. And she gave a whole bunch of awesome, awesome tips on LinkedIn, specifically LinkedIn marketing and content. And it turns out one of the things that sort of surprised me was the fact that your following count has nothing to do with the reach that your posts have. In fact, it will actually damage your reach more the more of a diverse audience you have on LinkedIn, which is
Really?
very interesting. Yeah.
Huh.
And it makes sense because even profiles that have managed with thousands and thousands and thousands of followers didn't really have that big of an impression count because the offer kept changing and
Yeah.
their ICP, their ideal customer profile that they would reach out to kept changing. So it definitely makes sense. And I think this change came in about year and a half ago. And she found more success actually reducing her follower count to like half of what it was. I think she had like 40,000 followers at one point. She actually had
Yeah.
to get rid of like 20,000 connections. And can you imagine like, and she did it manually, like sitting
Yeah.
there watching a movie and just like hitting all these buttons to disconnect with people to improve her reach on LinkedIn. So to me, that was pretty mind blowing. So LinkedIn is one that we're definitely trying to crack, especially that with Content Stash, we're aiming for the type of audience that are consultants, B2B consultants primarily that are producing their own content or looking to improve their content. So a lot of these people are on LinkedIn. And
Yeah.
so LinkedIn is definitely something that we're looking to improve. Instagram, I feel like we somewhat understand the concept and it's all about the short. Does your short hook? What's the visual like in those first 5 seconds?
Yeah.
What kind of a feeling does it portray? What kind of music are you adding to encourage that feeling? Can you really hook an audience? Versus YouTube is has been more of a slow growth. If I compare our
Yeah.
channels on YouTube versus Instagram, YouTube seems to grow slower in terms of its subscriber count. It tends to reward longer content more
Yeah.
as
This is
opposed
true.
to the short form.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I really appreciate what you said about LinkedIn there. I had no idea, even though I guess it's kind of intuitive. That'll definitely impact who I accept as connections going forward. Um, yeah, that's interesting. I've talked to some LinkedIn experts before, and they've never mentioned that explicitly, although they may have alluded to it. So that's really good information.
Absolutely. And we're gonna fire away, I think, that episode next week. I'll make sure to send it to you. And I honestly I need to not just watch, but like extract the notes. And that could be like a lead magnet of its own, just like all the common misconceptions about how to grow a LinkedIn audience.
Yeah,
And so
100%.
building this whole content stash brand has just been an excuse for me to produce more shorts, more educational shorts to learn about the algorithm myself. And it was the same way with breaking cigars, where it's like I was curious about cigars, didn't know anything about cigars, and and now I still know only a little bit. But the whole premise is that it's an excuse to learn. It's an excuse to dive deeper, and the content is just the receipts and you sharing with your audience along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I do I'm a part of a brand, a climbing-based clothing brand. Rock climbing is really a part of me. It's been a part of me growing up. And it's a very niche thing, rock climbing clothing. Like what? But it's great, and I've gotten to produce a lot of content for it,
Mhm.
and it's been fun. It's very different than like podcasting content as far as what people want. But yeah, just doing things where it's fun and you're able to grow and learn more in the process and develop your skills is like the greatest thing in the world.
What would you say has been your biggest bottleneck operation side of building your brand, recording those videos, releasing the podcast that you have? Operationally, if you could improve, what would be, let's say, like the top three things?
Okay. When you say bottleneck, are you saying in terms of growth or in terms of time, like how much time it takes me?
I would say more so time.
Okay. I'd say time-wise, I don't want the research process takes me a while, but it's not something I'd ever want to automate. So I wouldn't consider that a bottleneck. I think that the repurposing of content is definitely a bottleneck, especially, and I actually saw you made a video on this, but I really agree. It's the finding the content piece is takes a long time. And it's because you need to be so particular about what you are choosing. And it's hard to predict. I don't think that AI at this point can really predict and understand the feeling that a particular passage or sentence has, but it takes a really long time. So I'd say that's probably number one is choosing what I'm going to repurpose. And then from there, the number two thing would be cutting that down, trimming it down so that there are actually like perfect no pauses in between. And it cuts out the real fluff, not the fluff that Opus or Riverside cut out, but the real fluff. And that editing process is definitely the second biggest bottleneck time-wise for me. Um, Third, used to be reaching out to guests, but I don't have that much of a problem with it anymore. Yeah, I'd say those are the biggest two. Besides that, there are probably a bunch of little things operationally, but they are small in comparison.
And when you say the research process takes a bit of time, but you wouldn't give that up, I totally agree with you from the perspective of when it comes to the actual interview, and this is especially important, I think, for in person. My approach to breaking cigars and interview process is to like look up their LinkedIn, look up their socials, look up their background, run a few Claude prompts, and study that person up. And it usually takes me 5 to 10 minutes to get all of that information. In your case, like how much time, if you could quantify it nowadays, what would be like that range of time that you spend on the research?
Nowadays, I probably spend more like an hour.
Mhm,
But if I have a big interview, like someone I'm really excited to interview and I'm really impressed with, and I really want to impress, I might take up to like 3 hours preparing.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if they've had other pieces of content released about them. I think for many, I interviewed Brian Dezen from Pravada Cigars yesterday, and it hurt when he said, I answer that question a lot. Like, I think I asked him, like, about his first cigar. What was his first
Yeah.
cigar like? And the moment I asked him, I'm like, shit, like, maybe that's not the best question for this interview, but it seemed like the most logical way to open it up. And oftentimes, as interviewers, we're like looking to break the ice with something, and it ends up being a very commonly asked question. But I think when the person being interviewed answers with, I answer that question all the time, it's like, damn, I didn't do my research. And I think it's important to add into my maybe Claude research. It's like, hey, like explicitly say, if a question has been asked already, do not include that question. Because
Right.
I think nothing's more annoying for someone that does content frequently to be answering the same question over and over and over again.
Right. And sometimes they get really good at it. And the dangerous part with that is they can say the same thing, and it might be great information, but they don't really have the feeling behind it anymore. And that's not fun to listen to.
Absolutely. It's so automated at that point. It feels robotic.
Yeah. I have an interview. I won't name the exact one. I can tell you off air, but where I was so excited for it. And then the guy ended up being very just like he seemed like a robot. It's like, oh wow, he's just said all this like way before so many times.
And how have you noticed the space of content change with more and more AI coming out? I personally think it's crazy what we're seeing in the past just few weeks of the SaaS apocalypse, as well as all these major AIs making what seems like to most people incremental improvements, but are actually very significant jumps and leaps in tech. All the AI video generation, all of the faceless content that is coming out, all the AI slop out there when it comes to content, we're seeing less and less kind of authenticity, less and less face content, more and more AI. What do you think is the direction of content moving forward?
I think that content's going to continue to get more polarized, where you're going to get people that are going to go in the I'm not talking polarization the way we talk about it in the political sphere, but more in the creation process. We're going to have people that are increasingly more authentic and more them and more human, and that's what some people are going to like, and more just AI. And even people that are trying to be human using AI, I see it all the time. I'm at the point where I can I can't 100% tell, but I can pretty reliably tell if someone is reading an AI script or if they're talking from their heart. And although people can't necessarily consciously tell, I think they can unconsciously tell, and it shows in the view count, honestly. Um, Same thing on LinkedIn. I when I read AI writing, I know I get this like weird feeling when I read it. Um, and I mean, I've used AI writing for posts in the past on LinkedIn, and I've moved away from that direction because I don't like the way that it looks, and I don't think that that's how people are going to build their personal brands in the future. And personal branding is so important, and it feels like it's dying in some ways because people's personal brand is just a reflection of their AI chatbot.
People are seeking that raw, unfiltered rant slash thought slash opinion slash blog slash post.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. And I think it's important to not have AI as a crutch. It's very tough when you're starting off because when you don't know what you're doing, when you don't have this personality developed, when you're doing research or are looking to become a thought expert, thought leader in something, especially on LinkedIn, people tend to borrow from AI quite a bit. And I think the scary part is that the AI has gotten so good, especially when you start purposefully entering in grammar mistakes, missing punctuation, opening up with lowercase. Like there's little things that you can do to make it very hard to see.
Yeah.
It becomes almost you can't recognize it with your eyes, but it's like you said, there's this feeling that you get when you read it and you say, okay, like AI cooked here. It wasn't the
Yeah.
actual person.
Yeah. And AI can write some pretty deep shit. Like it can be good. Um, but I don't know, man. I honestly, I don't want to like predict anything with AI because I feel like every day I'm hearing different people that I really respect and I really look up to say completely opposite things of like AI is going to go in this direction and do this. We don't have to worry. We're going to work with AI. AI is coming for us and taking all of our stuff. AI won't even be a part of our like I don't know. I'm hearing all these different things, and none of them are true, but all of them might have truth to them. So it's been kind of annoying to me recently when someone is like just talking to me about what AI is going to be in the future because none of us know. None of us know. None of us knew we'd be here a year ago. Maybe a year ago we could have predicted it, but it's so hard to know exactly where it's going. And we just have to be open and like along for the ride, I guess, and use it to the best of our ability.
Completely agreed. And tracking that we're almost at time, do you have an extra few minutes for a rapid fire round of questions?
Yeah, go for it, man.
Awesome. Who is the best guest that you've had on your show?
Dan Millman.
What made that episode special?
It was a guy whose book I read in the period we talked about where I was kind of really figuring out that achievement wasn't the way to be successful. And I read his book and it changed my life in many ways and how I think about things. And I got to talk to him in person, and I still get to talk to him. I get to shoot him an email every once in a while and him respond. And this guy who wrote this incredible book that millions and millions of people have read and been affected by. And then I just got to talk to him and ask him the things that meant a lot to me. And I got to ask him the things that meant a lot to my friends who had read the same book. It was really special.
And again, what's the name of the book?
It's called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior.
I'll definitely check it out. Question number two, favorite AI tool for content?
I would have said ChatGPT a while ago, and now I'm gonna say Claude. It's been uh, the research it does. Yeah, it's incredible.
What's second to Claude that's like content specific?
Content specific. Yeah, I guess I don't really use like niche AI tools as much as I used to. Like I used to use Opus Clip. I used to really use Riverside's AI, um, and things along that line. But I haven't done a ton of I haven't used AI a ton in like specialized AIs for specific things. I use AI a lot in like helping my research process and um, creating titles and thumbnails and stuff. So I'd say my second would be Gemini now at this point because it's really good at research and pulling everything from Google. And if you want to know anything about anyone or anything, Gemini is incredible.
Love it. What is the best piece of advice you got from a guest that you actually use daily or weekly?
Best piece of advice I got from a guest. Um, David Meltzer told me that the key to a good life is to, uh, what do you say, make a lot of money and have a lot of fun. There was one other thing, and I think it was something to do with relationships, but the idea that you have to make money, and that's really important, but you have to have fun while you're doing it is something I think about all the time.
What's one thing every podcast guest says that you're tired of hearing?
Consistency is key.
That's one I hear quite a bit as well.
It's true, but there's so much like consistency is the bare minimum. When you're telling me that the key to your success is consistency, you're lying to yourself and
There's
you're lying
something
to
more there.
everybody. Yeah, exactly.
Worst interview you've ever done and what went wrong?
Um, worst interview I've ever done was with an author of a book, very woo-woo stuff. I capped it at 30 minutes. I said we were gonna go for an hour and I just cut the interview. And what went wrong is I don't know. I listened to a podcast with her on a good day and I didn't do enough research to figure out I shouldn't have had her on the show. She wouldn't stop talking and her voice her voice sounded like a robot. And if I was listening to a podcast, I would never want to listen to her talk. Yeah, it's mean, but it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had one like that recently, and it's tough when it turns away from a conversation and it turns into just the other person rambling about their specific topic as opposed to it as opposed to them not even sticking to the script but sticking to the purpose of why you're there and the conversation.
Yeah.
And a part of it is also on the host always to bring
It
their
is.
attention back and to set the framing, set the stage from the start.
It was definitely a lot on me. I learned a lot from that interview.
What's one thing you're grateful for right now in this moment?
I love that you asked that. In this moment, I'm really grateful just for the fact that I keep showing up for myself and I keep doing the things that are moving the needle. A lot of my frustration in the past has been because I've spent so much time on the things that don't help me progress in any way. But recently, it's been so much time spent on the efforts being spent on things that are tangibly moving the needle and the 20% that do 80% of the work. And I'm so grateful for myself that I finally just said, Jack, cut the shit and do that. It lights up my life in every way.
One last question from my side.
Yeah.
If you were to leave the world tomorrow and you had a chance to leave the message to the youth, whether it be your peers or younger, what would be that message?
Figure out what you really want. You know, we all go about our lives in a way where we're told that we might be good at this thing, so that's what we should pursue. You might find success here because, you could be a great engineer. You're good at math. You would be a great teacher. So that's what we go for. And we never spend enough time thinking about what we truly want and what lights us up. What are the parts of our day that we look forward to the most? What are we doing when we get that smile that we can't rip off our face because it's just there and there's nothing you can do about it. Figure that out, no matter if you know how you're going to do it or not. If it seems freaking impossible, you go for that because if not, you are literally living someone else's life and you're wasting the time you have on this earth and you're going to die regretting it.
Love it. Jack, where can the people find you? Where can our audience find you if they're looking for you?
You can find me on my new website, jackwagoner.co. The .com was very expensive. There's a famous actor with my name. Um, and you can also find me the Grateful Podcast with Jack Wagoner. Anywhere you want to find your podcast, you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn. Look up Jack Wagoner, the Grateful Podcast. You'll find me.
Amazing. Jack, grateful to have you. Thank you so much.
I'm grateful for you, man. This was an incredible interview. Great job.
Appreciate it.